Hey guys, welcome back to another video. Hope you're all having a great day. And I figured with the college football playoff now done with Indiana winning the national championship, I figured I'd come and do a mock draft 3.0 now that we know most of the players that are going to. Obviously, Miami and Indiana players will have an opportunity to officially declare, but we know most of the players who will be in this draft. So I figured, why not do a third mock draft now that the college football season is officially over? So, with no further ado, let's get into the mock draft. Starting with number one, the Las Vegas Raiders. It's a pretty easy pick, being Fernando Mendoza. He's the clear cut top QB, especially with the news that we got last week with Dante Moore returning to Oregon, which is really surprising because I know he played a bad game against Indiana, but he was still going to be the number two pick against the Jets. Now, a lot of people are speculating that he doesn't want to go to the Jets, so he returned to school. I don't know if that's the case, but it was really confusing. And now this draft is looking like last year's class, where top QB goes one, and then maybe another guy goes later on. This class seems worse because there's not really another guy really available to take unless you're like reaching on a guy who maybe has a high upside. But Mendoza's the pick. The Raiders, um plenty of the executives and even owner Mark Davis and Tom Brady were at the national championship. We still don't know who Vegas will hire as their head coach, but Mendoza is the for sure number one pick unless the Raiders don't want to draft a quarterback and they'd rather bring in a veteran, but Mendoza seems like the guy and hopefully can bring the Raiders back to relevance after they've just cycled through veteran quarterbacks. Went on number two to the Jets, and my two prior mocks, it was Dante Moore. It felt like, well, the Jets need a quarterback, and Moore was the next best guy. With him off the board, it's like, who do you go with? Do you go with Arvell Reese? Do you go with Ruben Bain? Do you go with one of the receivers, Tyson or Tate? It really depends on what the Jets really need, and I feel like I feel like with the questions they have outside of Garrett Wilson, I feel like you go with another Ohio State receiver and Carnell Tate. I know it's a little questionable wide receiver at number two. We haven't seen that really since Calvin Johnson because Travis Hunter was a corner and receiver. Um, go this high, but look, the Jets, like, if there's no quarterback available, why not just bring in another playmaker? I get you could go to Reese or Bain and really help out this defense, but I feel like you bring in another playmaker, then you have Wilson, Tate. A.D. Mitchell played decent enough where it's like, and he has still potential. So, like, that's your three guys. You have Mason Taylor. The O line is pretty good, especially with the bookends of Membu and Fashanu. And if they're able to bring back Brees Hall, that's a nice set of playmakers for whoever the long term quarterback is in New York. Moving on to the Cardinals, this was another team that probably wanted to get their hands on a quarterback, even though it's not out of the possibility for Kyler to stay in Arizona. But with not really, um, with no quarterback, obviously, and I think you go with a position that not a lot of people I think would say should go this high because the class hasn't really been that great. But in a draft class where there's not really many elite players, you might just see teams going with a position of need over the best player available because not many players are blue chip guys where it's like they're gonna be elite level players. And that's why the Cardinals go with Francis Mauigoa, the tackle from Miami. I think he can play right tackle. You have Paris at the left tackle. A lot of people think that he could move in to guard, which is a possibility, but like I know a lot of people are gonna say Arvell Reese or Ruben Bain, and that could be possible. We still don't know who Arizona's next head coach is gonna be, but I feel like not that many blue chip players. Why not go with a guy who can fortify a need and also help protect whoever the next guy is for the long term, whether Kyler Murray stays or it's a new guy. So I'm gonna go Maui No. Fourth overall, the Titans, and we found out Robert Saleh, the new Titans head coach, which was a little puzzling because it felt like Saleh wanted to go to a team that had stable management as the owner, unlike when he was with the Jets. And it felt like Tennessee was going to go with more of an offensive minded guy, more of a veteran coach. But I still like it. And with the players on the board, I think you go with Ruben Bain, back to back Canes. Um, right there. I mean, he's a dynamic player, and I mean, he can be, Robert Saleh's Nick Bosa for this defense. And it was revealed that Saleh wants to, unlike with the Jets, he would be calling the defensive plays, which means he, just like he does with San Francisco, he'd be the one calling the plays. And I know Reese, a lot of people are going to say, why don't you have him going, you know, but his play did start to go down in the later half of the season. And it's also, where do you put him as a position? Because, like, he's listed at linebacker, but he's more so like an edge rusher than a pure linebacker. And Ruben Bain, I mean, I mean, in that Miami, in the national championship, he was him, Akeem Mesidor. That Miami defensive line was getting after Fernando Mendoza. I feel like Tennessee, you could see them go wide receiver with Tyson or Makai Lemon, but I feel like Ruben Bain is the perfect fit, especially with Robert Saleh coming in. Moving on to the fifth overall pick, the Giants. John Harbaugh, the new coach in New York. He was the first of actually four consecutive head coach hirings. It was Harbaugh, then Stefanski, Jeff Hafley, and then Robert Saleh. So crazy how it's been four consecutive days of a coach being hired. Giants, an interesting spot because, you know, you have your quarterback hopefully in Jackson Dart, Malik Neighbors, and Cam Scatterbo should be back. The defense, if you make improvements in the you know free agency and maybe a trade, you can really help this out. And you could say offensive line. If Spencer Fano would be the next guy up, but I'm gonna go with wide receiver Jordan Tyson out of Arizona State. Could be the first one off the board when it's all said and done. Could be the first one off the board, but injury concerns could make him fall down. And I just think this is a perfect fit. You have Malik Neighbors, but who else? Wan'Dale Robinson is a free agent. Who knows if he's going to be back in New York? Tyson, I feel like, is a perfect fit for the Giants, who, you know, want to have playmakers around their quarterback to help them succeed. And Tyson would be a phenomenal player aside from Malik Neighbors to give Jackson Dart two elite pass catchers. Moving on to the Browns. This is another interesting pick because usually this would be a wide receiver, but Makai Lemon I don't think goes in the top 10, though we could. Um, and maybe go Spencer Fano, which I think I am gonna go with him. you know, like this class, like there's not many elite players, but I think positions of need are going to be pushed up the board, and tackle is a big need. And the Browns' offensive line, very old and very injured. Jack Conklin, Joel Bitonio, Wyatt Teller, you know, two of those guys might retire in Bitonio and Teller, and maybe in Conklin. So Cleveland's going to need to improve that offensive line, depending on whoever the franchise quarterback is in the long term. And I think Fontenot could be a perfect piece for this Browns offense to get back to playing well up front. Moving on to the Commanders at 7. I'm going to go with Arvell Reese. The fall for him ends here. Washington just needs to get better on defense. This could be Downs, maybe David Bailey. Like, they just need to get better on the defensive side because they're so old there. And, you know, I think Dan Quinn maybe will continue to be the play caller in 2026. We'll see who they hire as their DC, but they need to get better on defense. And Reese, who can be an edge rusher, who can be a linebacker, um, really gives Washington kind of a Swiss Army knife on the defensive side to put them wherever they want, and it could really help this team out. We're on to the Saints, an interesting team because um, there's not many big time needs for this team that are really available. Like wide receiver, Lemon, probably the guy you would go with. Seems a little too high for him, but who else would you go with? You go with maybe David Bailey, Peter Woods, Sonny Styles, replacing Demario Davis or Bailey to replace Cameron Jordan. Yeah, I'm gonna go with an interesting spot for a Saints team. I'm gonna go with Makai Lemon, U.S. receiver. I know I said it was too high, but look, this team needs to get playmakers around Tyler Shuck, and you have Chris Olave, who fully healthy year, played some of the best football. New Orleans will hopefully get a contract extension with him, but putting it that side of that, like when Olave got injured late into that year and wasn't playing, the guys they had out there were like Dante Pettis, Devon Vele. Like they need playmakers out there for Shuck, and Makai Lemon could be the perfect piece for a team that really, could be on the up and up with Shuck, Kelvin Banks. Like if they make these picks correctly and bring in some good free agents, New Orleans could be back to contending in a year or two. Moving on to the Chiefs at 9. I'm gonna go with Jeremiah Love. Top two tackles are off the board, so this wouldn't be a scenario where you maybe try to improve the offensive line. And look, Casey needs to improve that running game. Isaiah Pacheco is going to be a free agent. They're probably not going to bring him back. I know they could go after Breece Hall or maybe Kenneth Walker, but you can just go with Jeremiah Love. He's the best. He's maybe the best player overall in the class. And once Mahomes comes back from his torn ACL, you can have a guy who can reliably be a part of the offense. They brought back Eric Bieniemy, who I think, will maybe bring this Chiefs offense back to what it was, a couple of years ago when he was the offensive coordinator. Love would be the perfect fit. Moving on to the Bengals. Yeah, this is kind of probably between Downs or Bailey. And I'm going to go Bailey just because of the edge rushers are more valued than safeties. And they just need to improve this defense. Like Trey Hendrickson, more than likely is not going to be back. So, Shamar Stewart at least right now, is a bust. We'll see what happens. Um, if he improves. But look, David Bailey can be a immediate change and really give this defense a playmaker. To really be able to get after the quarterback. Yeah, I could see Downs because wanting to get somebody in the back end to help out, but look, this team needs to just help that defense out, and David Bailey is the perfect player for that. Moving on to the Dolphins, um, this is kind of an easy one. Caleb Downs, you know, obviously no Javon Holland anymore, and they hired Jeff Hafley, coming from the Packers, who had Xavier McKinney. Downs is a better player, at least prospect wise. Um, and they used to have Javon Holland, and we saw Kyle Hamilton fall to 14 because teams don't value that safety position. I feel like Downs could be pushed down the board the same way, but I think the Dolphins, who are probably going to have a new quarterback and maybe plenty of new positions, I feel like Downs, if he's available there, you go with him. You make that selection, knowing, hey, we have kind of like a Kyle Hamilton, Nicky Memori type, where you can move him around and have him make plays. For the Cowboys at 12, if Jeremiah Love was here, you maybe take him, but I'm going to go with Sonny Styles, a linebacker from Ohio State. Dallas just needs to improve this defense. I mean, you could say Keldrick Falk or Mansour Delane or even Jermon McCoy if you want to, um, take a guy who would be a top 10 pick if it wasn't for his injury. Rather than linebacker, get your next Sean Lee, Leighton Vander Esch before the injuries. Sonny Styles can be that type of guy and really help this Dallas defense um, out and maybe hopefully, have improvements to where this team can compete in the playoffs instead of, relying on the offense putting up 30 plus points a game. Moving to the Rams, obviously not going to go with a quarterback. There's no guy you would go with this 13th overall pick. You look at the tackles and, they might be set. Warren McClendon could be that guy to replace Rob Havenstein. You have a Lark Jackson on the other side. So I think you go corner. It's between McCoy and Delane. Do you want to go with the guy who has the proven production and is going to be healthy in Delane, or do you go with the higher upside of McCoy? I think they would go with Mansour Delane from LSU, the Virginia Tech transfer. And I mean, the Rams, they won the trade for Jalen Ramsey last year. Obviously, didn't happen. And obviously, they've been pretty good. They haven't really needed a lockdown corner, but I feel like, they still need that guy to be, a lockdown guy on one side. And Delane could be that guy. He's not the biggest corner, which, he's 6 foot 190. Doesn't have the longest arms, so that maybe would be a deal breaker. But I think a guy who could just really help out this secondary, make it a better unit. Because we saw against the Panthers, it was better against the Bears, but it can get picked on, and I think they need to improve that. For the Ravens at 14, I'm going to go Peter Woods. Nnamdi Madubuike might retire, so you got to get that replacement. And Peter Woods, who could easily be a top 10 player because of his talent, but he just didn't play up to his talent level this year. Most of the guys at Clemson didn't. But I think if he falls, you got to select him and you got to help out this defense. Because if you have that run stuffer in the middle, you can really be able to help out this defense and make it one of the better units again. We're on to the Bucks. This is an interesting pick. Yeah, you could go Caden Sadiq because Kadon's a free agent. You could maybe put, Caden Proctor, move him into guard. Maybe you want to say they could go linebacker, um, like CJ Allen or Anthony Hill, but I'm gonna go with Keldrick Falk from Auburn. They've needed an edge rusher for a while, really ever since Shaq Barrett kind of started to go, started to decline a couple years ago. They haven't really like they have Yaya Diaby, who's decent, and there's a reason why last year the first signing was Hassan Reddick because Tampa knows they need edge rushing help, and Falk would be the perfect guy to um finally give this defense a legit edge rusher. Moving on to 16, the Jets' second pick obviously went Carnell Tate at number 2. Here, this is an interesting. Maybe you go in Jermon McCoy to replace Sauce Gardner. This is the pick they got from him. Maybe go with, maybe go defensive tackle, to replace Quentin Williams. A lot of interesting fits. I'm gonna go with McCoy, who, like, rarely a guy with McCoy's talent falls to, you know, halfway through the first round. Like, a guy with McCoy's talent is usually a top 10 pick, you know, a corner that's, is like he's going to be a lockdown guy for 5, 10 years. It's just the injury concern. Didn't play at all in 2025 because of a torn ACL. Should be um ready for the combine in March, but still, you never know. But the Jets could, replace Sauce Gardner with a guy similar talent to Gardner and help out this defense that maybe year 2 can have improvements. Moving on to 17, the Lions. This is another team where maybe you go with um maybe go with tackle to replace Taylor Decker, who could be at the end of his career. But I think they've needed a secondary edge rusher next to Aiden Hutchinson. Like, they've relied on, James Houston, who was an undrafted guy. They relied on Marcus Davenport, former first rounder, veteran free agent, but they've never really invested into that edge two. And I think they need to with Cassius Howell, who does have small arms for um his size. I think a Lions team that needs to be able to get after the quarterback. Like, Aiden Hutchinson is that, elite guy, but you need other guys around him. They went with Tyleik Williams to improve the interior. I think they improved that edge with Howell. Went on to the Vikings at 18. An interesting pick. Minnesota, not really that many big needs because they kind of failed a lot of them last year with, free agency and the draft, but still have some big holes. And I think corner Avion Terrell, the younger brother of Falcons corner AJ Terrell. Yeah, outside of Byron Murphy and Isaiah Rogers, the corners, outside of those guys, were not that great. And Terrell, who I think is like 5'11", 195, right? Or 180. He's a smaller guy, but plays bigger than that. And I think a Vikings team that, you know, maybe with better QB play can be a playoff team next year, as we saw later into the season. Um, they just need to improve it. Moving on to the Panthers at 19. Could go wide receiver. Xavier Legette has not been that great of a pick. But yeah, I think you have McMillan, you have Jalen Coker. Um, I think they're set. I think it comes down to probably helping out this defense. And I could go with TJ Parker, the edge rusher from Clemson, who, just like his teammate Peter Woods, had the potential to be top 10, top 5. Didn't live up to it, but is still probably going to be a first round pick because, a lot of these edge rushers aren't going to be, three down players. A lot of them are more so guys who aren't great against the run, but are more so designated pass rushers. Parker is a three down player and a guy who can give this Panthers defense a huge help out. The Cowboys, this is the pick they got from the Packers. And went Sonny Styles earlier at 12. I think you and can continue to beef up this defense with corner. I'm gonna go Colton Hood. You know, finally they finally moved on from Trayvon Diggs, who was more so just an interception machine. Like he was not that great in coverage. He was just getting a lot of picks. DeRon Bland is not that good. So Dallas needs to improve the secondary, and I think you got a guy in Colton Hood who was able to, play really well because Jermon McCoy wasn't there, so he stepped up as CB1 and played like it. And I think the Cowboys, who need defensive help, like that offense, mostly set, outside of maybe Pickens, but that defense needs improvements, and I think you go defense with their two firsts. On to the Steelers at 21st. Maybe do you consider quarterback, but there's not really many guys. Like Simpson didn't play well down the stretch. Chambliss played really well, but it was a 1 year sample size. Carson Beck played decent down the stretch in the playoffs, but I don't think he's close to being a first round pick. I think they go wide receiver. They go Denzel Boston from Washington. They needed guys to really step up. Like outside of DK Metcalf, they don't really have any other good wide receivers that can be a wide receiver too. Like that's why I didn't understand why they traded Pickens. So I think they need to address that wide receiver two position. And Denzel Boston, who's a really talented wide receiver for Washington, can give this team, that a guy who can, step up if Metcalf isn't playing well and be a nice secondary option for whoever the quarterback is in 2026. Going to the Chargers, it's going to be Giovanna Oweno from Penn State. They need to improve that interior. Like, they just need to improve that interior that is not good. Like, Mekhi Becton is going to be gone. He didn't really work out. Bradley Bozeman and Zion Johnson were not great. Johnson's probably going to be there for another year with his 5th-year option, but you need to improve that interior offensive line, and Giovanna Oweno from Penn State can really give this offensive line a boost and give Justin Herbert better protection when you have Old Slater at the bookends. You improve that interior. You can really give Herbert more time to be able to help out. For the Eagles at 23, there's a lot of intriguing options. Do you go maybe tackle and you put, one of them at guard? Kaden Proctor, if he's the Lane Johnson replacement. A lot of people say tight end, but, Dallas Scott played well in that playoff game despite losing. Maybe do you go receiver with A.J. Brown potentially not being there? Corner's an option because, outside of Quinion Mitchell and Gilbert DeJean, they don't have, well, they don't have another guy on the outside because DeJean's more of a nickel guy inside corner. And I'm going to go Brandon Cisse from South Carolina. Because, like, they tried Adoree Jackson, they tried Kelee Ringo. Neither guy really worked out that well. And I think Philly, who is trying to get back to the Super Bowl, trying to get back to competing for that. I think bringing in another corner to really help out the secondary could be a good choice. 24th for the Browns, they went Spencer Fano from Utah. This could be another offensive lineman if they wanted to just get bring in two more offensive linemen to help protect whoever the quarterback is. This could be a wide receiver. Casey Concepcion from Cleveland, I mean from A&M. But I'm gonna say they just I'm gonna say they beef up this defense. I'm gonna go Caden McDonald from Ohio State. I think you have Mason Graham, Shelby Harris and a couple other guys are like the other D tackles on that team. I feel like why not bring in another guy, Caden McDonald, their home state, really backyard if you think about it, and improve that defensive line and really give this Browns team, a really good defensive line. Myles Garrett, Mason Graham, now Katie McDonald to really get after quarterbacks and make them lives win in hell. 25th for the Bears. This is an interesting pick. I think it should be defensive oriented. But who do you go with? I mean, Akeem Mesidor was pretty amazing in that run to the Natty. Zion Young is a guy from Missouri. I think I'm very high on, but I don't know if he's a first round talent now. I think they go with Caleb Banks from Florida. Injury plagued year, so didn't really play that much this season, but still a really talented player and a Bears team that needs some more defensive help. Because that defense played well against um Stafford and the Rams, so they have the potential. I just think you need to bring in more guys to help out on that side. 26, we got the Bills. No more Sean McDermott. We'll see where he ends up and where Buffalo goes. I'm gonna go with Casey Concepcion. They have needed a wide receiver for a while. Like they have neglected the position for some reason. Yeah, I know they drafted Keon Coleman and they have Khalil Shakir and other guys, but they've neglected drafting a guy in the first round ever since they moved on from Stephon Diggs. Concepcion, who can be that big play threat, who can give Josh Allen a guy who he can reliably um go deep on, I think can really help this offense take the next step and being one of the best. Whatever the Niners, you know, this could also be wide receiver. There's many guys here who I would say are first round talents now. Chris Bell could be, Jermaine Bernard from Alabama could be, but I think this is going to be a tackle, and I think it's going to be Katie Proctor. Trent Williams is not going to play forever, and the rest of the offensive line is decent, but not that great. And I feel like Proctor, who you could start off at guard, for anybody who you know isn't listening, but you could start him on at guard, because he was supposed to be this like really elite tackle. He just showed flashes, but never really put it fully together. But I think a Niners team that really should address the offensive line to really help protect Brock Purdy and to, have this offense being one of the best. And then once Trent Williams retires, you could put Proctor at left tackle to replace him, and it'd be a great um, mentor for him. For the Texans, I think this, interior offensive lineman, there's no really a Marion Hampton of last year, so but I think they should go with an offensive lineman. I would say Monroe Freeling from Georgia, who's really risen up. I get, the offensive line was better later on in the season, but in those playoff games, it was proven that they need help. You have Arion Tierce who could be that left tackle of the future. You have Blake Fisher and Titus Howard who could be, um, long term guys, but they don't really have a great group of guys where it's like, yeah, they're for sure not taking on offensive linemen. And Monroe Freeling, I feel like, could be a guy who could step in for Houston and really help improve this offensive line. The Rams at 29, this could be a quarterback. Maybe if they want Simpson or Chandless, who knows? But very interesting pick because, I went corner, obviously, Mansour Delane at 13. I said they don't really maybe need a tackle, so, they don't need to address that position, but I think maybe it still can be addressed. Um, like I don't think they need to go into the draft say we have to take a tackle, but if one of the guys is there, why not take him? He can, you know, maybe not start off right away, but hey, if there's an injury, he can be plugged in right away and really help this Rams offense out. Moving on to the Patriots, I'm gonna go C.J. Allen from Georgia, linebacker. Linebackers aren't that great. They've been decent. Spillane, Caden Ellis, but this defense, one of the best. Yeah, I mean you could say maybe offensive line because Drake May was going to beat up both playoff games, but I feel like you improve that linebacker core with C.J. Allen and really give this defense that you know middle like that quarterback of the defense, as linebackers are usually known as, and really help this defense take the next step. Denver at 31, Kenyon Sadiq. Evan Ingram did not work out as a free agent, and Sean Payton loves those. Loves using tight ends that are more so wide receiver types. Jimmy Graham with the Saints later on. Jawan Johnson, and I think Sadiq would be the perfect fit. And the Seahawks at 32 could go a lot of directions. Could go maybe interior, offensive line, could go corner. Tariq Woolen is going to be a free agent. I think I am going to go with Keith Abney from Arizona State to finish off this mock draft. Um, so yeah, Keith Abney from Arizona State to maybe replace Tariq Woolen if they're not able to get an extension. But yeah, that is my mock draft 3.0 post national championship. So hope you guys like it. Subscribe, hit the notification bell, and comment, if you want, other videos. And I'll catch you guys in the next one. But until then, hope you have a great day and bye.